That's Joe C. from California, not Josie.
No, you can't leave, man. It's this way.
Thanks, man. Thank you. My name is Joe, and I'm an alcoholic. I feel awkward up on a large stage with
You can move the
step.
box here.
Oh, I can move the box. I feel much better. Ah, gotcha. Perfect. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Joe, and I am an alcoholic.
Hey, Joe.
And I'm up from Los Angeles, California. So Doug tells me that I have 70 hours of available space on his hard drive. Y'all are in for a very long night. Thank you, Doug. Okay, so let's start with the easy stuff. I date my sobriety from September 22nd of 1988, when I was whisked out of a courtroom wearing a shirt and a tie and taken to jail. I thought I'd be able to get away with all sorts of craziness because, hey, I had 10 years of getting away with all sorts of craziness. And I walked in wearing my navy blue blazer, my white dress shirt, my gray slacks, and my yellow power tie. It was the 80s, don't you know? And it occurred to me that maybe, just maybe, I would be able to hoodwink the judge one more time. He saw right through me. I had a report that had been written by some probation people and another report that had been written by a psychologist in a prison, which I had visited shortly. And the report basically said, we believe Joe is incapable of living in good and decent society, and we believe that he should be locked up for the rest of his life. Now, I'm going to say that again because that's the only thing I remember from that day. We believe Joe is incapable of living in good and decent society, and we believe he should be locked up for the rest of his life. For the first time in my adulthood, somebody saw the real Joe. Because that's exactly who I was on that day, sitting in that courtroom wearing my yellow power tie and trying to look all hip, slick, and cool. The judge made a brilliant choice and sent me to prison. And there I am at age 28 years old, an extended drinking career of all of 10 years, from age 18 to age 28, and now I'm sitting behind bars. And all of a sudden, for really the first time in my life, it occurred to me that this was not a joke, that this was real, and that I had been the cause of all of my own misery and the cause of a whole bunch of other people's misery as well. And I had no clue how to manage that situation. I was just dumbfounded. So I'm a type A personality. I do a lot of talking. Sometimes for a living, sometimes at meetings, sometimes in general life. I just do a lot of talking. And for 10 years, I had done an awful lot of drinking and an awful lot of dry goods that made me a larger type A personality. And couldn't shut me up until that day sitting in that jail cell. That one shut me up. So I grew up in a small suburban community in the San Fernando Valley, just outside of Los Angeles, California. I am one of the 47 people who was born and raised in Los Angeles and still lives there. There are only 47, I've counted. My parents, my upbringing, my suburban lifestyle, none of that makes me an alcoholic. My dad beating me as a child, my mom ignoring me as a child, my grandmother loving me as a child, none of that makes me an alcoholic. I have a slightly different definition of alcoholism than you will find in the book. Please excuse me while I share with you my opinion, because that's all it is. I don't care how much a person drank. I don't care what you drank. I don't care how often you drank. I don't care where you drank. If you drank like me and had negative consequences due to your drinking, woke up, swore off, and vowed never to do that again, and then found yourself drinking again with more negative consequences, that's my definition of an alcoholic. And that's my story. I had lots of negative consequences. Lost jobs, lost girlfriends, lost a wife, lost cars. I forgot where they were parked. Nowadays, I rarely forget where my vehicle is parked. It's actually over there. I can see it from here, so nobody break into it, please. I'm rarely parked on the lawn when I go looking for it. Every now and then, but not very often. Today I'm on gravel. Does that count? All I know is that for 10 years, I drank and used an awful lot of stuff. I had more than my share, and I had some of your shares as well. And at age 28, I'm sitting there in that courtroom, listening to who I really am, and knowing that I'm not getting out of this one. And so I spent 19 months in a fine institution in the state of California, all of 5'11", 140 pounds, no homeboys at all whatsoever, because I was a solitary drinker. I didn't have a whole lot of friends and family. Matter of fact, I am the only person in my family who's an alcoholic. There are no alcoholics and no addicts anywhere in my extended family, even the ones who married in. It led me to think that at age 6 that I had been dropped off here by aliens. This is 1966, mind you. I was reading science fiction. I had read, Isaac Asimov, Foundation, and I clearly believed that the people that I was living with were incapable of raising a human child. And that somewhere out there, my real parents were going to come back and find me and rescue me and take me back to my home planet at age 6. My alcoholism lies to me. My head lies to me. This is just one more example of that. By the time I was 8 years old, I had my mom thoroughly convinced that it actually took me from the bell at 3 o'clock until 5 p.m. to get home from my elementary school in the 3rd grade. I lived across the street and 3 houses away. This is the ability of an alcoholic to tell stories, to lie to people. I am, for many years of my life, a liar and a cheat and a thief. These days, I very rarely lie, on occasion, and I've got a few people in the audience here tonight who know me well enough to know that I better not lie. I rarely cheat anymore, except in games. I don't like to lose. I'm very competitive. And I don't steal very often. Okay, it's progress, not perfection. I will tell you that I haven't stolen in years, and I'm going to try not to steal your time this evening, but honestly, I am who I am. 33 years of sobriety, and I'm still just Joe. I got out of that prison, and I went to a recovery house. I was visited by some little old lady. I think she was 82 years old, had a slumped back, blue hair, of course, and she drove an actual checker cab. And she was a little old lady from Pasadena. That's who she was. Everybody knew Pauline as the little old lady from Pasadena. What she did was visit Jewish inmates in jails and prisons all over the state of California by poring over lists of names that the sheriff and or the corrections department would hand her so that she could look for and find the potentially Jewish last names so she could come and visit them. She was an attorney. She had like 9 careers. She was just one of the most amazing human beings I've ever met. And she basically was my Eskimo. She saved my life. This woman we figured out, because after I got out of the prison and after I got out of the recovery house, I hung out with her a lot. Drove her, driving Miss Pauline. Whenever she didn't want to get in the checker cab, I would drive her in one of my vehicles. And we would go places together. And we figured out one day that in a career of over 50 years, all as a volunteer, mind you, as a volunteer, never getting paid a penny, she had visited over 100,000 men and women in jails and prisons all up and down the state of California. To this day, that still blows my mind. I cannot even imagine being that person. She also went to the local elementary school in Pasadena and read to the first graders up until she was 92 years old. She passed away about 10 years ago, and there's so few people who remember who she was that every time I share, I like to just bring her memory and bring her persona into the area, into the space where I'm sharing. She was that much of an impactful person to me and obviously 100,000 other people. So I go to this recovery house. It's a Jewish recovery house, which means they have an open kitchen. That's always a good thing for a nice Jewish boy who only weighs 140 pounds. So I ate a lot. And I went to a lot of meetings, and I had a lot of therapy sessions, and I had a lot of group sessions. And at one time, I think I had 5 therapists working on me at the same time. Some are sicker than others. My picture was in the dictionary on that one. And I had an art therapist, and I had a sex therapist, and I had all sorts of different people working on Joe, trying to get me back to being somewhat normal. I'd never been normal in my entire life. I had no clue what normal was. They talk in the big book about returning to normalcy, and I don't have a clue what that means. That's never been me. I'm a little nuts. I'm a little off kilter. I'm okay with that. I just don't go out of my way to hurt people anymore. Go figure. Being sober has allowed me an opportunity to generate myself in a way that a lot of my friends are happy I'm around nowadays. That was not the case when I was drinking and using. Again, I drank and used for 10 years. I know there's people out here who were out there for 50 years. I get it. I know there's somebody in the room right now shaking their head going, oh man, I spilled more than he drank. What has he got that I need? I know you're out there. It's okay. It's all right. I get it. All I know is I had negative consequences. I vowed never to do it again, and there I was a day, a week, a month later, drinking and using and having negative consequences all over again. My bottom was relatively low. I will tell you that I'm not the lowest bottom drunk in the room. I know that. But in any group of 100 people, I'm probably in the sweet 16. I was a mess, and I dragged an awful lot of people downhill with me at breakneck speed. And these days I try to do things where I'm not doing that anymore. So I'm going to focus a little bit on some of the craziness that I've had in sobriety. So we all got nutty and had weird things happen to us while drinking and using. I gotta believe that almost everybody out here has had some crazy thing, some remarkably nutty story that happened to them while they were drinking and using, and they can still remember it somehow. Every detail to this day. More power to you. I am not the drunk who can sit here and tell you that my best day drinking was better than my worst day sober, or however that line goes. Honestly, I had a lot of fun drinking. I will tell you that it worked for a lot of years, and it worked for a lot of situations until it stopped working. And then one day it just stopped working. No matter what I did, I couldn't quite get the chemistry right. I couldn't get just high enough or just sober enough. I couldn't get to the point where I was sleeping for overnight and then getting up and ready for work the next day. I just lost that ability somewhere. In sobriety, I have been through marriage and divorce. I have been through family events and being disowned by family members. I have been through lots of jobs. The old line from the movie, I have quite the collection of hairnets and name badges at home. That was me. In my 20s, I collected an awful lot of interesting occupations and jobs. Since getting sober, in the last 25 years, I've only had 2 jobs. Both of them to this day. I worked for a messenger service, and the messenger service morphed into this production company dealing with the still photography end of the Hollywood film industry. So I'm not famous. I'm barely even a peripheral helper to those people who are famous. But I go to a lot of photo shoots, and I learned a lot, and now I take pictures. I go all over the great American West, and I snap photos, and I share them with people who have never been to the places that I've gotten a chance to go to. I will also tell you that I've been refereeing basketball games and sporting events for over 40 years. Now, do a little quick math. I'm 33 years sober, and I'm refereeing for 43 years. That means that for 10 years, I was running up and down a basketball court, high on coke, after drinking alcohol, hungover. You think I'm a type A personality. Now, you should have seen me running around hopped up on adrenaline, testosterone, and cocaine. That was fun. But I was good at it. And because I was good at it, people looked the other way. I got enabled by so many Al-Anonic folks you would not believe. You know, I had assigners who didn't care that I would drink more than them and that I was doing dry goods and then go out and referee basketball games. They didn't care. As long as I did my job and didn't do anything galactically stupid, like, beat somebody up. You know, luckily I only did that a couple of times. Luckily I only got beat up a couple of times. So I was good to go for most of that. I still referee basketball games. 2 weeks ago I was in Phoenix, Arizona, refereeing a national tournament for a bunch of high school kids that are trying to go to college. It's a meat market. It's a mess. It's kind of icky on many levels. But there were hundreds of people in that room who had never been seen by a college coach in their entire lives. And now about 100 of them are going to get free college education just by showing up at this event that I got a chance to be there to referee for. How cool is that? I don't have a better way of making all that happen for them. So I suited up in my referee's uniform, and showed up and ran around and refereed 20 basketball games so that they would have one of a handful of decent referees who didn't live in Phoenix. That's the other thing. In my sobriety, I have had an opportunity to get in the car and just go places. Oh my goodness. I have been all over the great American West. I've refereed in 9 different states. I've been to 28 or 29 different national parks. Yesterday, I was at Zion National Park hiking in a side canyon that most people have never heard of the name of the river, or even know if you've heard the destination. I was looking for the subway, and I never found it. And I brought 4 friends with me. But instead of worrying about we failed, no. It was all about the journey and not the destination. The 5 of us had an absolute blast hiking 7 or 8 miles in a miserable, horribly difficult landscape, or as a friend of mine called it, serious sauntering. Yes, we were seriously sauntering, and we found our way in and out of the canyon. And guess what? We didn't die. We had a blast together. We're all sober still. We're all still friends. It didn't matter that we didn't get to the subway. That would never have been me years ago. Years ago, if I didn't get to the destination that I had pointed out on a map and said, I'm going there, all of you would have been in bad trouble. Not me. You guys would have been in trouble because I would have made your lives miserable, and I would have enjoyed it. That's the alcoholic you I'm sharing with you tonight. I got married. The only time I've been married. I got married on the day I was sentenced to prison. Wait, it gets better. I got divorced on the day I was released from prison. We've all heard of shotgun marriages. I had a shotgun divorce. I was hanging out with a gal that we were in love. We were certainly in lust. And And we spent an awful lot of time together, and we ended up living together for a couple of years. And she was just wonderful, and she was not an alcoholic, and she was a wonderful enabler. And it was just so cool to have someone who was willing to let me drink and use drugs and still live there. Again, until it didn't work. And I find myself in jail, and she doesn't bother to tell her parents or any of her family members for the entire time that I was running around the court system for about 9 months. And so on the day that I was to be sentenced, the judge in my case refused to marry us. Again, I was the person who was incapable of living in good and decent society. So he did not want to marry us. So we found some other judge elsewhere in the Santa Monica courthouse, and he married us with my parents there, but her parents not there, because she hadn't bothered to tell them. Talk about my head lying to me. I had convinced her that it was okay to lie to her folks that I was missing for 9 months and come up with all sorts of great excuses for me. Didn't we all love to have someone like that in our lives? At some point, about 4 months before I got out, her family figured out that I was not around. Again, I spent 19 months behind bars. So 15 months of that time, she didn't bother to tell anybody. Finally, with about 4 months to go, she goes and tells her family, and they decide that I'm just not good enough for their daughter. Go figure. And they're going to make my life really difficult, as if I hadn't gone out of my way to make my life difficult already. And one thing leads to another, and one of them's an attorney, and he says he's going to make stuff up, go into court and make stuff up so that I don't get out of jail if I don't divorce Vicky. I'm like, whoa. Okay, hey, Vicky, we're getting divorced. There's no two ways about that. We're getting divorced. Sorry, dear. So on the day I got out of prison, I went to my parole officer, and then we went to an attorney, and I got my walking papers and set her free. I've only spoken to her once since then, and it was to make amends for all the havoc I caused in her life, and to give her a proper Jewish divorce so that she could go to Israel and maybe meet the man of her dreams. As it turned out, about 3 years later, I heard from a mutual friend that she did just that. So I was able to actually make amends to this woman whose life I had absolutely messed up. So there I am, newly divorced, newly released from prison, and living in a recovery house. And doing probably 20 groups a week, and at least 8 or 10 actual 12-step meetings every week. They talk about 90 meetings in 90 days. I was doing 90 meetings in 3 weeks. And this went on for month after month after month because I didn't know how to do anything else at that moment in time. They told me, suit up, show up, and hit a meeting. Okay. I'm living in a recovery house. Get in the druggy buggy. We're going to a meeting. Okay. And we would descend on some meeting like locusts, eat up all their cookies, drink all their coffee, bum cigarettes from everybody, and create a general ruckus. It was a blast. I left the recovery house at 11 months after my stay. So basically 19 months of being in prison and 11 months being in the recovery house. I had 30 months of sobriety, because I count my sobriety date from the day I got whisked out of that courtroom, because when I got to the prison yard, my bunkie was the guy who ran all of the drugs and alcohol for all the white boys on the yard. So again, God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. He made it very clear to me that if I wanted anything, I could have it for free. And I thought to myself, there is no free lunch in a level 3 prison. I've seen enough movies. The first person I saw in the prison was 6'8", 320 pounds, and his nickname was Tiny. I figured I was screwed right then and there. Turns out his nickname was Tiny because he was so big. Oh, never mind. I did not take Wes, my bunkie, up on his offer to drink and use with impunity, because I knew that somehow, some way, I would end up dead. Because I'm stupid. I'll say the wrong thing to the right person and I'll end up dead. So I chose not to do that. Somehow that worked. Like with almost anything, given an opportunity, I'm just bright enough to get myself into a whole heck of a lot of trouble. And by that I mean I can figure out the system and I can program. I can plug myself into whatever the system is. And prison was a crazy place with crazy rules, and in a crazy, weird way, it all kind of made sense. Okay, and I plugged myself in, and I did all the things that they told me to do, and I did a handful of the things they told me not to do. But everybody on the yard, because I was the custody clerk, and I worked for the captain, and I could type. So I did all the bed moves. So no matter what, almost everybody on the yard owed good old Joe a favor. Because I decided I didn't want product in response for giving your homeboy the bed in the dorm next to you. No. I didn't want to have to, I was still 140 pounds. I didn't want to have to fight everybody to keep merchandise. So I said, no, you know what? I don't want the carton of cigarettes. I don't want a thing of ice cream at its door. You're going to owe me a favor. And like the Godfather, and at some point I'm going to come to you, and this favor you must do. Because you see that big guy over there? He also owes me a favor. And you see that big guy over there? He also owes me a favor. And you see that one over there who's 6'8" and 320 pounds? Yeah, he owes me a big favor. So don't fuck with little Joe. Worked great for me. So I get out of the recovery house basically because again, 11 months in a recovery house, that's a long time for those of you who have actually been in recovery inpatient settings. 11 months is a heck of a long time to be in one place. The program director came to me with about 10 and a half months into my stay and said, hey, you're not getting this. We don't know what to do to help you get it. You're trying to be honest, but you're just too long a liar and a cheat and a thief. And you know what? We don't want you here when you reoffend because it's going to hurt our court standing in various courts in Los Angeles County. So go. You have 2 weeks. Find a job. Find a place to live. Grab your car. Do whatever you got to do. You're not living here anymore. And I thought to myself, well, gee whiz. I'm sober, aren't I? Isn't that enough? And it never dawned on me at that time that it wasn't enough to just be sober. There had to be something more, but I had no idea what it was. So I left, and I had a remarkable AA resentment toward this woman. And I stayed sober for the next 5 years, basically on righteous indignation, and I'll show her. I don't recommend it for all of you people who have little to no time, and I saw a whole bunch of you with less than a year tonight. I don't recommend that. It doesn't work for everybody. It's my story. It worked for me. After 5 years, I was headed back to do more illegal activities. I did the hat trick, and I performed a nice misdemeanor and got caught. And I found myself in jail again. And stupid thing. I walked in and they said, oh, it's a misdemeanor. You'll be out here in a couple of days. And then every week for 12 weeks, I went to court every Wednesday morning in LA County for 12 weeks. And every time I went, the deal kept getting worse until finally they were offering me 9 years in prison with an extended parole following that. Misdemeanor with a felony prior, they looked down on that back then. Not so much today. But, thank you to our new DA. Almost makes you want to go out and commit crimes again. Just kidding. But back then, it was really serious. It was the 3 strikes era. And this was going to give me 2 strikes and 9 years in prison, 5-year enhancement. I mean, all the neat little stuff that we all heard about for years. And finally, the same person, this beautiful little old lady, Pauline, who is now about 88 years old, showed up at the jail and said, hey, the recovery house is willing to take you back. I don't know why, but they're willing to take you back. The deal on the table is 9 years in prison or 6 months time served and 6 months to live at a recovery house. I'm like, okay, 9 years or 6 months time served, because I've already been in for 6 months, and 6 months at the recovery house. 9 years, 6 months. Took me 3 weeks to make that choice. Again, my head lies to me. There's no way I wanted to walk back in with my tail between my legs, still sober, mind you, and walk into a recovery house 6, 7 years sober, to live among, rats and I mean rodents, and roaches and all sorts of dirt and this was a place down in the old Westlake district across the street from the original Tommy's. This is not a high-end facility in Malibu. I just didn't want to be there again, and it took me 3 weeks to make that choice, and hey, I took the deal. So I ended up going back to the recovery house, and Chico figured 9 months later, the same lady in charge came up to me and had almost the exact same conversation. She says to me, all right, you're doing better, but you're still just not quite getting this. We see you being honest, but we don't see you being authentic. Now, I studied words in college. I never graduated, but I certainly understood what many words mean. And so I'm looking at her going, okay, authentic. You didn't tell me I had to be authentic. If you had told me that from day one, I would have plugged right in. Yeah, right. So there I am again, leaving the recovery house, tail between my legs, a failure. This time I did not walk out with the resentment. This time I plugged in. The next day, after being asked to leave, I was back there for a meeting. The day after that, I was back there for an in-house meeting. I did 90 meetings in 90 days. I found a sponsor. I actually picked up, where is it? The big book. Where's our newcomer? Where's our newcomer? There you are, Alona. That book is boring and will put you to sleep. Feel free to read it anyway. I did, more than once. I found gems of wisdom I did not know existed in the real world. I read that book cover to cover. I fell asleep a lot, but I read that book cover to cover. One of the things I figured out from reading that book is I am not unique. I am not the only one who's had this problem. It says right in there, hundreds and hundreds of people have gotten sober. Now, millions and millions of people have gotten sober. I find that amazing. Because I wasn't willing to plug in for so long. And now finally I was ready and willing to plug in. At one of the meetings that I went back to the recovery house for, again, I shared that I had no clue what else there was other than getting and staying sober. There had to be something. There had to be a purpose to life. There had to be a reason for Joe to be sober and not be dead yet. My higher power must have some reason for having kept me around this long. I kept saying to myself, at 7 years sober. And one of my buddies, the sponsor of a good friend of mine who I'd gone through the house with, came in one evening for a meeting, and we were all just shooting the breeze and having really bad AA coffee, and eating snacks and listening to a speaker. And then after the speaker, he tells me that he's taking off shortly to go up to Utah for an AA convention. And I thought, wait, hold on. You want me to go all the way to Utah and go to an AA convention and hang out in a national park? Okay, I'm in. And I said yes. On that day, I made a choice to be a yes. I have found that by saying yes, an entire universe of possibilities opens up. Windows and doors that were not there when I was a no, all of a sudden appear. And there's a whole universe out there. All I got to do is say yes and step through the door and climb through the window. Hey, in my drinking career, I had plenty of practice climbing through windows. Why not sober? So I went with him up to Utah, and we hung out, and I went hiking, and I ended up in the back of the Narrows at Zion National Park. and I fell in love with the surroundings. I have no proper gear. I'm just walking. I have no idea where I'm going. I have no idea what I'm going to find. All I know is the walls are getting tighter, and they're now 1,000 feet high, and I'm standing in a river waist deep, and I can reach my hands out and almost touch the two smooth sandstone walls. And above me, 1,000 feet, is this sliver of blue sky, and everything else is in shadows. And it's dark, and it's dank, and it's wet, and I'm completely uncomfortable, and I don't care. And I just keep walking deeper and deeper into this canyon as if it's pulling me back there. And all of a sudden I saw what appeared to be a slight glow of orange, and the walls slightly changed color. And I kept walking, and it got a little bit lighter and a little bit oranger and a little bit lighter and a lot oranger, and all of a sudden it broke into a cove. And in this cove was a dogwood tree, one of those beautiful green-leafed dogwood trees, and it was 30 feet tall, and it was dark except for a sliver of light coming through a cleft off to my left in the rock wall. One rock wall on one side of me was still 700 or 800 feet high. The rock wall over here to the west, in the late afternoon sun, was only about 200 or 300 feet high, and a shaft of sunlight was lighting up the tree like something out of the Ten Commandments. And I sat there on a rock, sunning myself in the sunlight of the Spirit, talking to God. And I won't stand here and tell you that God answered me, at least not in that moment. But I will tell you that over the years, God has absolutely given me an awful lot of answers to problems that I didn't even know I had, questions that I didn't even know I needed to ask. God has given me answers, sometimes almost immediately. Sometimes it takes a little longer. When it takes a little longer, my buddy Kane from Los Angeles loves to say, hey, if God is not responding to you and answering you in a timely fashion, consider he's really old and he's really busy. Okay, I can live with that. So every now and then I will talk to God. And I did in that day, in that canyon, and all of a sudden, it was as if the purpose for my life was laid out in front of me. That purpose was to be able to share with others, in AA and not in AA, how to live a good and decent life and be a fine, upstanding member of society. Because I was no longer that guy who stood in that courtroom waiting for the judge to pronounce sentence on me. And I knew it. And now I had a purpose. And now I had a reason for being and a reason for living. And we went up to that AA convention up in Beaver, Utah, and I put a name badge on. Whoop, my name badge fell off. Oh well. I put a name badge on, and I sat in the coffee shack, and I served coffee to 300 people. And all of those 300 people knew my name by the end of the weekend, and I hated every single one of them. They were all happy. I wasn't happy. I didn't know what happy looked like until I saw you people stepping up and getting free coffee. That made a lot of people very happy. It didn't matter if it was any good, which I always found fascinating. So I did something crazy. I remembered something my sponsor had said to me in Los Angeles during those first 5 years that I was walking around with nothing but resentment. And he said to me, Joe, if everyone around you appears to be enjoying themselves and you are not, consider that the problem is not them. And so I did the other thing that he always used to say, which was take contrary action. If something is going on around you that you don't like, join the committee. So for 26 years, I have been on the Great Outdoor Beaver Committee. I keep trying to get off in the spirit of rotation. I mean, isn't that what you guys are dealing with here this weekend? We're all supposed to rotate in and out of service commitments. I'm still on that darn committee. And you know what? I couldn't be happier. I get to be of service. I get to be the guy who does the website. I get to be the guy who does the communication and sending out all the emails to alert people that we're having meetings and planning meetings and when the event is and what to do and see when you're in the southern Utah area and you're not at the convention. Gee, go figure. I've now been hanging out in Utah 5, 6, 7 times a year for over 25 years. I've driven every single road, paved and dirt, south of Interstate 70, all the way to Kanab. I'm that guy. I get to be the guy who shares that information with folks in person, online, via email. It doesn't matter. You got dumb questions, I'm the guy to ask. I'm cool with it these days because I no longer hate you people. I actually like some of you. I like Mike. I like Don. Where's JR? I like JR. God help me. All I can do is suit up and show up and do the next indicated thing these days. JR's been trying to get me up here to speak for 3 years. He comes to me, we were sitting in Beaver 3 years ago, 2019, and soon thereafter he calls me up and says, hey, we're starting our planning meetings for the Flagstaff Roundup. We want a mutual friend of yours and you to come up and speak. Okay, when? He says, it'll be in June of 2020. Okay, I'm in. And a couple of months later, obviously, the world changed, and that didn't occur. And then in 2021, he calls me up with the same thing. Let's do this. Okay, great. And it still hadn't gotten back to normal enough where we could all have a fun time and hang out together. I live in Los Angeles. Don't get me started on pandemic protocols. That said, I was very happy to not infect everybody with my germs from Los Angeles. You don't want those. So again, JR gets in touch with me now, only about 3 months ago, and says, so shall we try this again? I don't know, are you having an event this year? He says, yeah. I said, okay, great, let's do it. You know what? Yes. I will just be a yes, and I will show up when you want me to. And then over the last few months, I've had several opportunities to just be a yes. A buddy of mine calls me up on a Friday night and says, hey, we're all going up to Ridgecrest tomorrow for an AA roundup. You're coming. I went, and I was trying to think of 9 different excuses not to go. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, no, God is clearly sending me a message. Maybe it's time I just stop trying to put Joe's will in the way and just say yes. And I went, and it turns out both the speakers were people that I knew, even though I was 200 miles from LA. Go figure how that works out. And we have so much in common. Another buddy of mine says a couple of weeks ago, hey, I'm going up to St. George and hanging out at Zion National Park the first week in June. You're invited, free. All you got to do is put gas in the car and get up here. I went, okay, yes. And so for the last 3 days, I've been in St. George, hanging out, wandering around, sauntering at Zion National Park, as I love to do. It's my favorite place. I've been there about 110 times. Because you see, my higher power lives in the back of the Narrows at Zion National Park. He vacations in Los Angeles, but he lives in that canyon. And I go to visit him at least once a year, if for no other reason than because I can. I get to live today as a free man. I get to live today as someone who's no longer waiting for the aliens to come and pick me up and rescue me. I still am the only alcoholic on either side of my family, and I still can't understand how that happens. It does truly feel like I was dropped into the middle of a family that was relatively normal so that I could create havoc. And I did. Short story, it was 7 years of sobriety before I was invited to any of my family's homes. That's how much damage and wreckage I caused to my family. 7 years before I got invited. And even then, they told me the wrong time in the hope that I would be late and show up on time. I fooled them. I showed up when they told me, and I was 2 hours early. And they never played that game again because they realized I was no longer the guy I used to be. See, that's one of the things that comes out of working these steps and plugging into a higher power and suiting up and showing up and saying yes. All of a sudden, I get invited places. All of a sudden, I get to wander around with some really neat folks. You know, I have a wild and eclectic group of friends, AA and otherwise. I still referee basketball games, and I still know some of those folks who knew me back in the 80s, when cocaine was a staple. I still am friends with people on the production company sets, because I get to go and see the same people every few weeks for the last 25 years. They no longer have to worry, am I going to steal something? They no longer have to worry if I'm going to show up on time. I have a photo shoot that I'm going to on Monday morning. Yes, that's a day and a half from now. I will be driving home tomorrow, and I get up at some ungodly dark 30 hour, load up a truck, and show up at a photo shoot and hang out there for 12, 14 hours. And be of service to these people, some of whom are active alcoholics, some of whom are complete normies, and some of them are in recovery. And I get to suit up and show up and be part of their lives for the day. And what a wonderful thing that is. One of the things that comes up for me whenever I get to share in front of a group of people is that I'm really grateful. I am so grateful. That's so with a capital S and a capital O. That I get to suit up and show up, be healthy enough to do some of the crazy stuff I still get to do. In the last 2 days, I've hiked almost 20 miles. And yet I'm still standing here for an hour. You know? How cool is that? I got to visit my favorite place, Zion National Park, and I got to hang out with my higher power for a little while. I got to spend the last 3 nights with several buddies and a couple of their family members. And at some point, I was in charge. Yeah, Joe was in charge of something. That's funny. I got to be that guy for these people, wandering around in a canyon. And they relied on me and trusted me to get them back safely. Because I'd been there and they hadn't. How cool is that? I am just so grateful to still be able to, to wander, to saunter, to take photographs, to hang out, to be a part of other people's lives. It never occurred to me, even 7 years sober, that was going to be my existence. Here I am 33 years, and all I want to do is whatever's next. Now, for those of you who are relatively new, I will share with you that I still have lots of problems and issues, and the world does not always work the way Joe wants it to, darn it. During the pandemic, I was ruled a non-essential worker, which meant that I did not work for 16 months. Both of my career path jobs, you'd think during a pandemic that picking up at point A and delivering to point B would be an essential job. You'd just think that would be appropriate. I mean, Amazon was doing it. Why couldn't a production company? Never occurred to me that sports were going to be outlawed. So therefore I wouldn't have any games to referee. But there I am for 16 months, not working. And for the first 10 or 12 of those weeks, I was going nuts. I was going absolutely crazy. My mind kept lying to me, telling me this is going to last forever. We are never getting done with this. And I'm going to die, and no one's going to know I died because I live alone. That's what my head told me. Turns out that's not necessarily the truth. I had an opportunity. All those wonderful pictures that I've been taking for the last 25 years and 10,000 pictures that I've taken in the last 5 years at those 29 different national parks, and all those thousands of beautiful spots all around the great American West, I put them together into something I called a virtual road trip. And I used an assumed name, and I called it the virtual road trip of JoJo Pelly Jones. Because JoJo Pelly Jones just sounded cool to me. It was, it both started with a J. So I put this together, and at first it was just going to be, I was going to throw a whole bunch of my photos up, talk about where I wasn't, because I was at home the whole time. Holed up in my little one-room hovel of an apartment on the 4th floor of a building near downtown Los Angeles with the original, built in 1926 with the original rats and roaches, still living there. And there I was sitting there, and I wasn't allowed to leave because, you see, in Los Angeles they had outlawed hiking. You weren't allowed to hike. They had caution tape in front of all the trails. Police line, do not cross. You weren't allowed to go to the beach. They actually arrested a guy on a wakeboard 200 feet out in the ocean. Coast Guard came and arrested him for violating some provision that you weren't allowed to go to the beach during a pandemic. Who knew? It was the epitome of social distancing. And yet they arrested him anyway. None of these rules made sense. Stop. So there I am in Los Angeles, hunkered and bunkered and sheltered in place, waiting for something to do. And all of a sudden I put 10 or 12 photos together of some place in the California desert that I had shot 3 or 4 years ago, and I called it the virtual road trip of JoJo Pelly Jones, and I put it up on my Facebook page, and all of my 12 friends clicked like. And I'm like, okay, this is cool. So I'll go ahead and put this up now on a couple of the Facebook groups that I'm a member of. The hiking in California group, and the Eastern Sierra group, and the hiking the Utah group, and I put it up in like 10 or 12 groups. And by the end of the day, I had thousands of people looking at my photos. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Do these people have nothing better to do? No, they didn't. They didn't. They weren't allowed to travel. They weren't allowed to go anywhere. We were all in a shared misery of not being allowed outside. So all we could do was sit there and watch Netflix or go on Facebook. And everybody who got on Facebook was saying, oh my God, thank you so much. I really needed this because I'm stuck at home too. I had one guy say to me after about 2 weeks of being there every single day, clicking like and making some comment, he said, JoJo Pelly, again, my nickname, JoJo Pelly, you are the highlight of my pandemic. I didn't know how to take that, but I kept doing it. And for 90 days, I put up anywhere from 10 to 20 photos every single day of all of the places I had been visiting all over the great American West for the previous 5 years. Always telling folks, I'm really at home. I'm not really out on the road getting the Navajos sick, even though my pictures are from Monument Valley. No, I'm not doing that. I know better. Of course, that didn't stop some people from actually getting in touch with me and complaining and yelling at me online, in all caps, by the way. That's how I know they were yelling at me. But for 90 days, I shared with people, and we had a common, something really magical happened in those 3 months. I got an opportunity to share with people who were not necessarily alcoholics. And I tell people all the time, I'm an alcoholic. I was right there in Front Street. I wear my alcoholism on my sleeve, whether it's in person or in the public or on Facebook. Turns out a number of the people who started following my virtual road trip are also in program. I got to meet some of these people in various places. Handful of them showed up in Beaver, Utah this last September. So every now and then, saying yes is the actual right thing to do. Because when I say yes, other people get to have an experience of yes as well. So like I say, I've got all sorts of problems and idiocies that go on in my life. My head still lies to me. because I didn't work for 16 months, I'm probably lost out on $60,000, $70,000 worth of income that at my age I'll never make back. Oh well, money is not what drives me today. I do know that every now and then I let those problems overwhelm me. I have suffered many times over the years from clinical depression. I went to, like I said, 5 therapists at the same time. All of them knew that I was really depressed and kind of manic and really nutty, and that I really needed a lot of help. So I got a lot of help. I was even on some psychotropic medication for a short while. Ooh, it's an AA meeting. I'm not supposed to say that. Sorry. But I say it on purpose because a doctor, 5 doctors, were seeing me at the time, and they all agreed that I needed something more than just an AA meeting in order to survive and be a part of a good and decent society. And so I followed their direction. They were my medication sponsors. I've had hiking sponsors, I've had AA sponsors, I had medication sponsors. And it worked. And I only had to do that for about a year. And after about 6 months of doing it, all of a sudden, one day, it was as if a smoke screen had lifted and I could see the mountains. All of a sudden, one day, I was very clear that there was something going on in the universe bigger and badder than Joe. And that I just needed to plug in. And for those of you who are out there right now tonight, whether you have 1 day or 33 years or 31 years, wherever Doug is, or 33 years or 48 years, if your problems feel bigger and badder than you are, consider that your higher power is bigger and badder than your problems. All you gotta do is plug in. I get today that no matter how big and bad my problems seem in my head, that 95% of the 7 billion people on this rock would gladly trade their problems and their issues for mine. And that leaves me in everlasting gratitude. I want to thank you all very much. One thing before I close, having been on the Beaver Committee for 26 years, and I've known JR for, 15 or 16 of those, I think, I can tell you that I have nothing but respect for those of you who have been involved in putting this together. This is an undertaking. This is an amazing, extreme bit of service. And I really want to thank you all for doing this so that a poor slob from LA can come up and hang out with y'all. Thank you very much. Yeah.